In today's video, I'm going to be going over what is involved in the entire 10K service here on the Iron 883, and it starts right now. So recently, I personally did the 10K service here on my Iron 883. Just for your reference, this is the 2013 model, but the work that I'm going to be going over that's required for the 10K service is the exact same for many of the year models, including other Sportster models. You'll want to refer to your owner's manual to make sure, but we're going to go over all the different items. Also, just to let you know, I am not an experienced mechanic, and this is not an in-depth how-to from a professional. What this is going to outline everything that's given from the service manual, plus some research that I've found, some tips that I've found, give you an overview of what to do, and then you can decide if you feel like tackling that on yourself, or if you feel like it'd be better to spend that extra money. I think it was $430 that was quoted to me from Harley Davidson. But recently, if you've seen my video, if you haven't, take a look up at the top there, and I'm going to post a link there for you to take a look at the actual oil change for both the engine and the primary oil. And that video was fairly in-depth. I showed the entire process, and I do suggest trying your hand at that. Even if you are new to this, I really think that it's worth giving it a try, and you'll save yourself a lot of money, and you'll know that it's done right. So what else is involved? Let's go ahead and get right into the 10K service. As mentioned before, the 10K service, the primary portion of that work is doing the oil change. So you want to change both the oil for your engine and your primary. Check, watch my video on that. The second item that you want to do, you want to take a look at the oil lines and brake system. And it says specifically to inspect for leaks, contact, or abrasion. So you want to check all of your lines here from both your clutch and your brake on both sides here. Trace them down, make sure there's no major scuffings. Again, this is just an inspection. Don't freak out too much about taking on this. What am I looking for? I don't know what to... You're looking for common sense stuff here. Does it look like a hole is wearing through somewhere? Are there fraying edges? Something along those lines. If everything looks good on that, go on to the next item. Next item, check the air cleaner. And it says inspect and service as required. Again, don't freak out about it. You're just inspecting. In my case, if I found anything wrong with any of these items, I personally would not feel comfortable with trying to, troubleshoot a brake system or something like that. I would probably take that into a dealership. Okay, so here we have the air cleaner, and I've got a Torx 30, which is the size needed for this stock air cleaner here. Okay, so this comes off real simply. Just pull it straight off. As you can see here, it's not too bad. There's a little leaf in here. If it was really bad, you might want to take a bit of some sort of pressured air and just kind of clean that out. But you just want to look through there. You want to see if any of these fins are bent drastically. Minor bends are just fine, but anything that's completely pushed over to where it's blocking airflow, or if there's any holes in this item, that's when you'd want to probably replace that. So let's go ahead and put that cover back on. This one looks good. Okay, next item on our list is you want to check the tires. You want to make sure you have good tire pressure, and also that your tread is not too shallow. You can buy this handy little item here off of Amazon. Link in the description for where to get that. But basically, you have a little readout here that gives you how many 30 seconds is what I went by, that you have left in tread. And if you just take it and put it in one of the tread pieces, push it all the way down, you can see there, hopefully you can see that clearly enough, there's about 4 30 seconds left in that portion of the tread. I do have areas that are more bald than I would like on this, all the way down to the 1/32nd, which is in the manual marked as the minimum tread depth. So if you are getting close to that 1/32nd mark, it's probably time to get new tires, and that's gonna have to be something done on my bike. Next item on our list is the clutch. It says here to check adjustment. So this is an important part that I'm hoping that I can shed some light on to clarify what does that actually mean. Well, first things first, and this is kind of the overarching theme of doing the 10K service, is if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Common sense, right? So you're just checking things, you're making sure they work correctly. And if you ride your bike any at all, you probably already know whether your clutch needs to be adjusted or not. Here's how you can tell. If you have tons of play right here, as you can see, I'm pushing a little bit of pressure and I've got a little bit of play, but that's good. You want just a little bit. But if this was going halfway in here without me having to actually put any pressure on it, if it was having that much play, that would be a problem. The other side of the test, get out on your bike, put it in first gear, hold your clutch all the way in, and see if it tries to creep. Just sit there for a minute, and even if it's a little bit, then it's out of adjustment. You don't want any sort of creep being pulled on that bike. That means your clutch isn't fully engaging and it needs to be adjusted. So that's a quick and easy way to test to see if it does need to be adjusted. Now, J&P Cycles did a really good video on this, and I'm going to post their video down in the description if you want a more in-depth from a more professional mechanic in doing this, but I'll give you the overarching idea of what you're gonna be doing. So right here, behind this item here, you can pull this down, and there's a little screw. You unscrew that, you loosen it up, and that will fully loosen this cable up, okay? Then you have to have your bike set not on the kickstand, but jacked up straight up and down, so that when you pull this primary cover off, there isn't oil pouring out of here. So you get that set up, pull off this primary cover, it's just these screws here, pull that out, and then inside there's a flathead screw that loosens or tightens. And what you do with that is you tighten it all the way until you feel resistance. And in this case, it's kind of wonky. You normally tighten to the right, but in this case, since it's backwards, you're actually tightening by turning to the left. So you go to the left until it tightens all the way. Once you start feeling resistance, you stop and you take it back a quarter turn. So I'll let the professionals do a video on exactly how to do that. I haven't done it myself because I don't need to, and I don't feel qualified to do so. So check them out if you're interested in that part. Next on the list, drive belt and sprockets. It mentions here to inspect and adjust belt. So what is that talking about? So let's take a look here. And it's talking about, this is your drive belt right here. So you're checking to see, again, if there's anything frayed, any frayed edges, or if you see in the teeth that you're missing teeth or you have major chunks out of them. And you're also looking, hopefully you can see this here. If you can't, the sprocket goes all the way around this item here. And you're wanting to check in there again for major chips or damage in that sprocket. Lastly, you're checking the adjustment for the belt. You need a little bit of tension here, but not too much. It needs to be the right amount. Now, they actually have a tool, the item that you can use to check this pressure if you really want to be very exact. I'll put the item right across here. But that's the Harley Davidson tool that you can use. It's a little item that you basically push down, and it measures how much pressure there is pushing against that. So you can do it that way. There's an easier way though, if you're fine with not being super perfectly exact, and that is try to bend this all the way to a 45 degree. If you can go 45 or farther degrees by pushing this without too much effort, just put a little pressure on it, then it's just fine if you're under the 45 degrees. If you can push it over 45 degrees, then this is not tight enough, it's too loose. And that causes the wrong points of tension along that belt and can cause damage in the long term. So you'll want to check that as well. The next item on our list is the throttle, brake, and clutch controls. So you're checking again for common sense items here. Checking to make sure the throttle works correctly. It's not too loose. It doesn't have damage on it. It feels right. It has the right amount of tension when you throttle back on it. It's going. You're not like pulling it halfway and then it starts to go. Things like that. Your brake, again, you're not too loose here on the end, but you have enough tension that when you pull it back all the way, it takes a little bit of effort, but not much. and you get a full brake pressure there. We've already gone over the clutch, but I want to read this part out of the owner's manual to say, not just in my own words, but what it says. It says, the need for attention to clutch and controls will be indicated by the clutch slipping under load or dragging when released. So again, ways to indicate whether or not that is going to be necessary for you to do any real work on it. Mine turned out all okay, and again, I have a good feel for it in driving it. I check these pretty much daily, so that wasn't a big problem for me. If you do have to lubricate any of the areas, it was noted to not use things like WD-40, anything that is a solvent, and so I'll just put that out there. I'm going to link in description Great Egret. I found a good video from him on doing that if you have to get into really tearing that apart and looking at it. Next up is your kickstand, aka the Jiffy stand. It says here to inspect and lubricate. So what you're inspecting for is any damage, bends. Check your spring in the back here. If there's any major gaps in the spring where it's bent out too much, that'll cause it not to spring back properly or vice versa. So you want to just check that. All those things you're probably already going to have noticed if you ride your bike often, but it is important to check. And then lubricate if it's too hard to move back and forth or squeaky. In my case, there was no work that needed to be done. Next up here, we have the fuel lines and fittings. So it says here to inspect for leaks, contact, or abrasion. What I did, and again, not a professional, I checked over every line, whether it be electrical, mechanical, or some sort of fuel line, spark plug, whatever. I just checked over all of these. I would not be the one to be able to tell you necessarily for sure with confidence which one is which in all cases. So I'm not going to try to do that. If you want more detail on that, you're going to have to get that from a mechanic, but it is part of the checklist, so I want to make sure you know it's there. And next up, we have the brake fluid. So here you have a little spyglass in here. Just check to make sure you have brake fluid in there. All it says here is inspect sight glass. So you're just making sure that you have something in there. As far as I have done on my research, I haven't found that there is typically major problems with that. As long as you got brake fluid in there, you should be good to go. At least at this point, it's not required. And next we have the brake pads. Now you have, in this case, we have brake pads here on the front, and of course we have our rear disc brake pads. And it's really hard to show on camera, but you take a flashlight, you shine it down in there, and you're just checking to see how much of your brake pad do you have left. Now, let's see, I have it here. The manual says that the minimum thickness should be 0.04 inches or 1.02 millimeters. So that's a pretty small amount. As long as you have more than that, you should be good to go. Move on to the next item. Okay, next items on the list have to do more with the brakes. And especially this area, I don't feel confident. I didn't have to take mine apart for any reason. I've never done it. So I do not want to try to advise you on how or what to do in that case. If you need work done on your brakes, seek advice elsewhere. But I do want you to know what all is involved, at least in this process. So it says the front brake lever pin to inspect, the brake caliper pins inspect, brake caliper boots and bushings inspect, and the rear master cylinder outer boot inspect. Now I could be wrong, but I have a feeling that when you take this in to the dealership and they're doing your 10K service, they're not actually taking those components apart. I could be wrong. Maybe some places do. I, for one, am big on if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I have not found any information leading me to believe that those items go bad to where you do need to take that apart, at least within this interval. It's not a time that you would need to replace them. So a lot of times what I've found is when you take stuff apart, many times when it's being put back together, there can be other problems that can happen. And so I'd prefer not to pull those apart. In my case, I'm leaving them because I have no problems with my brakes and they all work just fine. Next up we have, moving right along, our electrical. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on, and what you have to do here is just basically do a basic check over to make sure all your electrical is working correctly. Now, a lot of this you already check every day because you have to use many of these components in order to drive, but let's just go over a few of them, make sure we're not forgetting anything. So I've got it turned on. Our brake lights, both of them are on, check. Front headlight, check. Both blinker lights are on, check. Left blinker, check. Right blinker, check. Have your horn, check. High beams, check. Low beams we already checked. Check, check, check. And then of course you have your kill switch. Turn to run, it's coming on. Have my engine, check engine light come on, goes off, should come back on one more time, go off, wait for it, and it finished. Okay, all the electrical checks out, we're good to go there. All right, moving right along. Next on our list is critical fasteners. Now this is one item that I was really bummed that I wasn't able to find more information on. I was able to find the torque requirements for all of the different bolts from the service manual, but there wasn't a very good diagram to explain to where I could, with confidence, I can make some educated guesses here, but with confidence, I don't have the ability to really point out what each one is and assign their torque value. So this is what I did. Feel free to do it however you would like. I checked over each torque on each screw and just made sure it was satisfactory. It was not like coming off. It wasn't, when I put a wrench to it, it didn't completely wiggle there. There was a good solid tightness. A lot of mechanics don't even use the torque specs. I do think they are important, but unfortunately we don't really have enough good documentation to really be confident, in my opinion, as to where they all are and how much is needed. In fact, a lot of the newer bikes, they don't even have torque specs. So take that as you will, but checking, it says all the critical fasteners, even small ones like up here where your brake holds on there. I actually have one loose one that I am going to be tightening that I haven't done yet, and that's this one right here. As you can see, it's kind of moving. So I'll go ahead and tighten that up and we'll get on to the next item. Okay, it ended up being this particular screw on mine that was a little bit loose. So now, as you can see, no play in it. Looks good. Next item on our list is the engine mount and stabilizers. We want to inspect those. Again, I don't want to be sounding like I'm being cavalier that these things aren't a problem. As far as these critical fasteners coming loose, on Harleys, they definitely do have tendency to come loose, probably more so than other manufacturers, just because they're known to be made out of a lot of these solid bolts and pieces of steel that are constantly vibrating. They have more vibrations than other motorcycles. Therefore, physics just cause this to be a thing. So do definitely make sure that you're checking these things. Again, I'm not really qualified to show you which ones are the appropriate ones for the engine mounts, but using common sense, down here seems like where the engine may be fastened, and I really liked to just check over everything myself. All right, almost done here. The second to last item on our list is the exhaust system. It says inspect for leaks, cracks, and loose or missing fasteners or heat shields. As you can see here, heat shields are all there, and you just want to look behind. That's where your actual exhaust is, behind those heat shields, and just make sure there's no openings, cracks. Again, you're probably going to have already noticed this if you had anything like that. But check over that, make sure that's all good, and we'll move on to the next item. Last thing on the list is to do the ride test. Now, you know your motorcycle probably better than anybody, so this should be the easiest part for you, but take it out, try everything on the bike, make sure it all works, make sure you're checking the front brake and the back brake, all of your electrical items again when you're on the road, making sure leaning back and forth feels good. All of those things are important, especially if you made any adjustments in this process. Now, again, safety, I feel like is a very important thing. So if you don't feel confident with any of this, don't try to do it yourself, especially when it comes to critical areas like your brake system. Take it in to the dealership if you feel uncomfortable about that. Or in my case, I felt comfortable checking over all of those things, but I would not feel comfortable with replacing the brakes on this bike, for instance. Probably an easy process, but I would personally choose to take that into the dealership. And most likely on the 15,000 mile, I would take this into the dealership and have them just do a check over, make sure I didn't miss anything in the previous step. But I don't think that it's necessary every 5,000 miles on these bikes to spend near $500 to have someone check it over for you. I feel like you could do a check in between and have them do the alternating checks. The ones that involve more work, they maybe require replacing bigger items. That being said, hope you enjoyed this video and we'll catch you in the next one.